Being 5:30, we'll start the neighborhood subcommittee meeting. Mr. Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Chairman Leahy,
Here.
Counsel Laurie,
Here.
Counsel Mercia.
Here.
3 present.
Thank you. Tonight's agenda, we have discussion of Fowler Road, gardens, and discussion, second item on the agenda is discussion of new ideas for traffic solutions in and around the city. We'll take up the Fowler Road first, and if we can have speaker come up to the microphone and introduce yourself, and you have a short presentation for us.
Thanks. I'm Lydia Sisson from Mill City Grows. I'm joined by Francie Slater as well, who will come up for the discussion part. Can I come in to do the clicking?
Sure,
through?
yeah.
Or do you mind doing that? Yeah. Can I click from here? That would be incredible. Technology. Okay. So, Mill City Grows is a 2-year-old organization that was started to help provide fresh food access for residents in Lowell. 4 in 10 residents say that they can't find fresh fruits and vegetables near their home in Lowell. And so we started Mill City Grows 2 years ago with one community garden to help address some of these issues. We decided by creating urban food production, educational programs around urban food production, and diverse food access points for Lowell residents, we could really tackle the problem of food access in the community. So today, 2 years later, we coordinate 3 community gardens, 80 garden plots that are filled with almost 8,000 pounds of produce being produced in these gardens a year by 270 individuals. We do over 13 educational programs each year. Our 2 main programs are the Gardener Training Program, which is a seasonal, in-season program, and then the Garden Coordinator Institute, which is a leadership program that we do in the winter. We've had over 200 participants this past year. We started this past year on Middlesex Street, 230 Middlesex Street, to lease an eighth of an acre, where we have a temporary urban farm, and we've grown 3,000 pounds of produce off of just 1/8 of an acre, which is pretty impressive on such a small scale, and we get to sell that produce at the Lowell Farmers Markets and other mobile markets we do, as well as donate some to the Transitional Living Center. This year we also worked with the Wang and Pawtuckaville Memorial Schools, as well as the Pawtuckaville Citizens Council, Lowell Recycling, and Solid Waste to install a school garden at that school. And we've worked with many other partners as well to help install gardens. So what our proposal is for 72.1 Fowler Road is to install an urban farm. And I just want to give you an idea of where this parcel is. If you look at this picture right here, you can see the old Maycom building, which is now a property run by Wynn Stanley Enterprise. We are proposing to enter 72.1 Fowler Road through the Wynn Stanley property. So you can see Fowler Road is landlocked. The parcel is landlocked from Fowler Road and Boulevard Street, as well as Wedgwood Circle, which is accessed through Pawtuckaville Boulevard. So we're proposing to enter through there and to have no added parking or traffic pressure to the neighborhood behind the parcel, the city-owned parcel, which is about 4 acres. So we would not be driving on Fowler Road or Boulevard Street. And Mill City Grows staff would oversee all operations and production on the site. So we've done a pretty extensive planning process, which has been really wonderful. We worked with Wynn Stanley Enterprise to develop an appropriate access point, and then we started outreaching to the neighborhood. We wanted to make sure that we weren't accessing through Fowler Road or Boulevard Street before reaching out to the neighborhood, because we knew that wasn't an appropriate solution for the neighbors. So once we developed that appropriate access point with Wynn Stanley, we started a neighborhood community meeting. We got a lot of community input, developed a draft proposal, sent that back out to the community for feedback, and then have edited it, and that is the proposal that you have on your desk today. It's a draft plan, and now we did a big outreach session this weekend to get people here to hear the plan. So we did a pretty extensive planning process with the community, and we can't really see that picture, unfortunately, sorry. But the urban farm basically will be a production farm. So There will be limited access to the site. It will only be Mill City Grows staff. We will talk with the neighbors about future educational groups, potentially school groups, but the request from the neighborhood was to have small groups where neighbors didn't want large groups, so that's part of the proposal. We'll be doing organic vegetable production, so just vegetables, all organic, no pesticides. And we'll be taking the food off-site via a mobile market to sell in neighborhoods in Lowell. That was part of the request of the neighborhood to not have increased traffic. And we will also be doing a year-round growing. So we'll be growing all the way into December and starting back up in February. If you look at your packet, there's a proposed site plan here. And this Wedgwood Circle is, again, access from Pawtucket Boulevard, There will be a couple tractor roads, which are just dirt roads, and all of our storage areas, wash stations will all be to the back of the parcel from Fowler Road, so as far away from neighbors as possible. We've met with a lot of neighbors to talk about drainage, et cetera, and this was the best plan we could come up with to accommodate. The entryway and the water hydrant would both come from that Wedgwood Circle, which is the back of the old Maycom building. And again, the entryway would be a gravel entryway with a locked fence. Sorry, this is not translated well onto this, but our plan is a phased approach. So we would start next year with a half an acre garden, and then we would move it up to the full 4 acres in 3 years. So a nice planned phase approach where we would be working with the neighbors to make sure that all of the development was appropriate for the neighborhood. So why an urban farm in Lowell, and why should we do this? An urban farm will create a very important food system and food source for our community. Now in the US, we see more and more natural disasters, like last year around this time, Superstorm Sandy. We see that there are a lot of climate change events, associated events. So an urban farm will help us have a local food source. That's one big reason. The other big reason is that a lot of people in our community want culturally appropriate foods. We have an extremely diverse population, and this is a wonderful way to supply that. We can work with residents to articulate what these foods are and grow them and sell them right to our neighbors and create an affordable food supply here in the community. We can also create a more sustainable future for our children and our children's children, which is another thing that urban farming does, is it brings people close to their food system and allows them to understand the value of sustainability. So there are a lot of other successful models in other cities, and I'm happy to answer any questions about those. But just 2 years ago, there were only 3 farms and gardens in the city of Lowell, and today there are 9. So we could really do an impressive thing here in the city, having 4 acres in full production and supply thousands and thousands of pounds of food to the local community. So I'll open it up for some questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Mercia?
Could you, Lydia, could you please just tell me how you will put the water,
Yeah.
irrigate this now? You said behind Maycom?
Yep, that's a really good question. So, and it's also a really big consideration in our proposal. There currently is a hydrant, a fire hydrant, a city hydrant that we could tap into. We've met with Dan Lahiff from the water department. And he said that that was a feasible short-term solution, if not long-term. And so we could tap right into that hydrant, and it wouldn't relieve any pressure from the water. Also, all of our irrigation systems will be using a drip irrigation system, which is not like an overhead sprinkler. So it takes water pressure down to about 20 parts per second. So it's very, very low pressure. And that way we won't be creating any excess water. I know that the Maycom building and neighbors have said we don't want any added water into the system. So we'd be also using water testers for soil to see how much water is in the soil to make sure we're irrigating appropriately.
I just want to say that some time ago I made a motion to create a garden on Middlesex Street, and it didn't go very well, but it was sufficient to some degree, but not really the best, and people lost interest in it. And you and your group came along and revitalized it to the point where I went by and was flabbergasted to see that. there's nothing I love better than to go into the earth and do that myself, but it isn't everyone that has that opportunity or their land to do that, to get fresh vegetables that they grew themselves. I think this is remarkable, and to think you have three different places and this here. And you did talk to the neighbors, because the number one thing here is whatever comes into the city, we like to have input from the neighbors to say, this is what our proposal is. Do you want to add any input into that? And you have already done that, so you're ahead of the game already. And I think this is a remarkable idea, because this is much needed in the community. Just like Councilor Marty Laurie brought forth different recreational tools into the city and water park and all this, because people don't have the money to go to the beach or to the lake or whatever. So we gotta, you know what you did? You brought the country into the city. You brought the farm into the city, one garden at a time, and I think that's remarkable. So I commend you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie?
Thank you. And again, I'm very familiar with the Rotary Park project. Now, this is 4 acres. How many families will be utilizing?
Well, so this wouldn't be a traditional community garden in the sense the way Rotary Park is, which has 40 families. This would actually be run by Mill City Grows staff. So we would probably have about 6 staff members growing food, and then we would be taking that food into the community. So we could feed hundreds and hundreds of families. If we did a membership model, we could have over 100 members, and those would be families of 4 traditionally. So yeah.
Now, you're going to be accessing Fowler Road through the old Macomb building. There's no liability for the city at that point, is there?
While we're on the Macomb property, I don't think so.
No.
No, I mean, we're covered by a pretty large liability insurance, and we would make sure that Macomb was covered in that, and then anytime we're on the city, we'd make sure that that liability insurance was also covering the city.
That was my only question. I think that use of 4 acres out there is probably just the best use you could do. I wish there was some movement towards utilizing it for families. Lowell is about 50% apartments, really. And that area of Pawtucket, a lot of condos, a lot of apartments. So I think you would probably get some. But you'll find, knowing you two, you'll find another area somewhere
Yeah.
to utilize. So
Yeah.
a great project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions. I didn't know if anybody from the neighborhood was here that wanted to add anything.
Great, thanks.
Yes, my name's John Hamblett. I'm the co-chair of Pawtuckettville Citizens Council. Just historically, we were a little caught by surprise. The first we heard of this was when we saw it in the city council packet. And so there was a little bit of scrambling, email boxes filled, phones rang off the hook. But Francie and Lydia came to the rescue. They met with everybody, and there was a good turnout at that neighborhood meeting. We actually met down very close to the site back, I think it was about the 3rd week of August. Just so I can share what some of the neighborhood concerns were from their perspective. A lot of the yards back up onto this property, and there's no fencing. And so their concerns were primarily who's going to be out there, what are they going to be doing, where are they going to be working on the property, and when are they going to be there. So I think Lydia and Francie have done an excellent job of responding to that, both in the memo and directly to the neighbors themselves. We certainly don't have any objections. This is a great project. They've got a good track record. We worked with them up at the Wang, putting together a raised bed garden up there, and so we wish them all the success. If I were to underscore 2 concerns, one is we're starting to see the homeless move in along the river now. There are 2 encampments, one on our side of the river, one on the other. And so I hope that that doesn't interfere with the security that they may need on this garden. And the second is to emphasize how important communication is. The neighborhood doesn't like to be caught by surprise. So if there are changes, we all need to make sure that we're talking to each other. So we wish them good luck. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was one of my concerns also, that I had spoken to Lydia about, that especially on the Maycom side, we want to make sure that there's plenty of visibility into the garden, so it's safe for both people working there and anybody that
Absolutely.
volunteers you have or whatever, so. All right, and you met with the neighborhood group, as they said, and you have a deer fence around the perimeter?
Well, that's something, so we did meet, and I think that that's still in question. So one of the things we've learned is that not everybody agrees on everything. So some neighbors really want a fence and some neighbors don't. And so I think what we have proposed to the group is that we, one, institute an annual or biannual meeting with the community so that we're always checking in. And that could be a celebration of the harvest, but also just a good way to keep communication going back and forth. And two, the fencing, we hold off on the first year because we'll be doing a smaller parcel, about a half an acre. Then the fencing isn't necessary. And I think that would maybe give the neighborhood a little bit of time to come together and figure out what works for everybody. We've also talked about, instead of fencing, maybe doing hedging or some kind of visual barrier. But yeah, we really do want to work with everybody and make sure their experience, their backyard experience isn't changed too much. And that if they want a fence, great. If they don't want a fence, that's okay too. We'll work with them.
Okay, I mean, you know your business, does this type
Yeah.
of, when you put a garden in, do you get more deer, or do you,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, so,
Yeah. Well, yes and no. There's already a lot of deer in Pawtucket.
like, there are, so,
According to our neighbors, and you'll hear from them soon. But so there are a lot of deer. We've heard some pretty remarkable ways to deter them that don't include fencing, and so we're going to look into those as well first. We know that we have a lot of different methods that we can put into place before going to fencing.
okay. And it sounds like, having the meetings with the neighbors is a great idea, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sure, Councilor Mercia?
Yes. Who owns 72.1, this property, this landlocked property? Adam?
City, yeah.
City.
The city owns it.
Yeah, the reason this is, just for some clarification, the reason this is before the city council is that this is a city-owned parcel. And when Mill City Grows approached the Department of Planning and Development and the city administration about their interest in this site,
Right.
we took a look at it from just sort of a technical point of view and thought this seemed like a fairly good fit. But we thought that prior to taking any formal action, the best thing to do would be two steps. One, inform the city council and find out if any of you have any particular reactions to it before we ask you to take a formal vote, because at some point in the event that this is deemed a good idea,
Right.
it will require city council approval before it can go forward. And then the second thing was for them to go out and meet with the neighbors. And we wanted to make sure that the council was aware of this, at least discussion of a city-owned property before they started knocking on doors and talking to the neighbors. And that's why it was in your packet before anyone contacted the neighborhood.
So-
But they contacted the neighborhood right after that.
So which they already have
Yep.
done that. So then I would suggest, as a subcommittee, that we request that the manager have the city solicitor prepare the proper vote. You bring your presentation before your report of the subcommittee, and that we as a city council subcommittee support it, which I would ask then that we have the city manager have the city solicitor prepare the vote to allow Mill City Grows to use the property at 72.1 as specified in the proposal.
Second.
Is that all right with you,
Yes, that sounds
Mr. Chairman? Okay,
Thank you. So we'll make that motion and second it, and,
yes.
okay.
Roll call.
Chairman Leahy,
Yes.
Counsel Laurie,
Yes.
Counsel Mercia,
Yes.
3 yeas.
Was there anybody else here that wanted to speak on that? Sure.
Nothing different than what's already been said, really. My name is Rich Snyder. I'm from 94 Fowler Road. This property was my family's farm in years past, so I'm all for this. I'm glad to see it used again, as it always has been, so I just give my 2 thumbs up to the whole project, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Right.
Oh, Eric.
Councilors, my name's Eric Nelson. I live at 154 Parkview Ave in Lowell. I'm here tonight on behalf of Win Stanley Enterprises, the landlord of the building. We've met with Lydia and Francie multiple times, and, we support the effort, and we look forward to working with them and in the neighborhood going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, second item on the agenda is let's see, to generate new ideas for traffic solutions in and around the city, including but not limited to speeding, parking, and proper signage. What I wanted to do with this is get the involvement of the neighborhoods, the neighborhood leaders, and from city's standpoint, and create a discussion to make sure that we're all on board, that we want to take a look at new ideas for any type of traffic solutions in the city. Over in Centerville, we have a problem with Bridge Street and the backup with the lights. We've had requests come across about speeding in the neighborhoods, parking on the corners. So I don't know if where we want to start with this, but I'll let Councilor Laurie go first.
Thank you. As far as Lakeview Ave and Bridge Street, that project is going out for bid in February of 2014, I believe. Mr. Bakey?
That is, to refresh folks' memory, that is a MassDOT project, and they have
Right.
announced to us that the advertising date for the bids will be March of this year. They have been known to have projects slip from time to time, so we can't guarantee that will happen until it does, but hopefully that will be the case. And
A
then-
year ago, that was, I believe, August of 2013, so it keeps slipping. But it should, I think by next summer, you'll see some work being done over there.
Well,
by
no, not
MassDOT.
necessarily. Unfortunately, the MassDOT bidding and contracting process just takes some time. So a bid advertising date of March may mean that construction could happen in the fall of next year, but it
Right.
also could mean that we wouldn't see actual construction activity until the following spring, potentially. I don't want to get
Okay.
people, I very much sympathize with the folks who have to drive through there every day, but I don't want to get people's hopes up artificially if MassDOT may or may not be able to deliver on that schedule.
And again, that's an area where we've actually written MassDOT, I believe, several times. We've met with the delegation to change the timing on the lights, and we're just really getting no cooperation from MassDOT, and they won't change the timing.
Well, they did make, there were basically two suggestions that, I'm actually joined here by Transportation Engineer Eric Eby and City Engineer Lisa DeMeo are both here, and they should correct me if I say something wrong. But I believe we made two requests of MassDOT. One was to change the coordination between the signal at Lakeview and the VFW and the signal at Bridge in the VFW by basically connecting them so they could talk to each other and actually coordinate the traffic flow between them, which was one of the causes of problems at that intersection. And they did make some modest improvements to that have actually had a discernible benefit out there. The second thing was the recognition that one of the things that was causing additional delays out there was the exclusive pedestrian phase. Right. And that's the area where we have made a number of requests, as has the delegation, but MassDOT has not been interested in that in the short term. The good news is that the most recent set of plans, draft plans that they provided of the permanent solution does indeed incorporate the concurrent pedestrian phase that will reduce that potential delay as one of a number of things in the permanent project that will make things better. I do want to make sure to caution everyone to realize it's not going to be perfect when they're done, but things will operate better than they do today.
Well, they did have somewhat of a public meeting at the Lowell Library, and I know somebody, Emery Page was there, on their plans for that area once construction does start, whenever that will be. The other area that we've had some success, and I know there's been a lot of complaints across the city. We have a lot of speed traps, a lot of the police are out there constantly. But I believe last year, and I could be wrong, I don't know if Eric has the information, we were down about 465 accidents from the prior year. to the point I had made a motion on the council floor, and I think it was recognized. We sent a letter to the governor asking that they consider dropping the insurance rates in Lowell because of the drastic accident reduction. So we have had some success, but any suggestion tonight would be greatly appreciated, I'm sure, over the next year.
Yeah. Did you have anything, Councilor?
No, but you two are welcome to sit up here and use this microphone if you have something to say, because we won't hear you back there, but you're welcome to come up forward here. Yes, absolutely. And
So through you, sure,
Miller, Heidi Miller.
sure.
Hi, I'm Heidi Miller. I live at 124 Beacon Street. We deal with traffic every day, whether or not we are going down 3rd, getting onto Bridge Street, or if we go down the other end, go down 1st, and get onto 110. There was an accident last Friday with a school bus. You cannot take a U-turn off of 1st Street and get onto 110 when the traffic is moving between 50 and 55 miles an hour. It's very dangerous. So we're seeing accidents down there. So I'd like that addressed. I'm not sure what the solution is. I would prefer to see maybe some speeding traps maybe down there in the morning between 6 and, say, 9 o'clock, because it's very difficult to make that U-turn. But one of the things that I've been doing is I've gone out and I've talked to business owners and employees on Bridge Street. I've been doing an outreach program with CNAG. And one of the concerns is the early morning traffic along Bridge Street heading south towards downtown. We find, and we've all been in agreement, that if we stopped parking along the south side of Bridge Street between 6 and 9, it would allow 2 lanes of traffic from 6th Street to 1st, and that would allow traffic to get through that area quickly. Right now, there's signs up that allow 15-minute parking, which is not enforced. People park there all day. There's no enforcement. The only thing the businesses are concerned about is by the time they open their business at 10 o'clock, that parking ban be lifted. Otherwise, they're all in agreement. They've all signed a petition that between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning, they would allow no parking along that side of the stretch of roadway. I'm just hoping that we can consider this as a solution so that when we do have that intersection of the VFW highway and Bridge Street start the construction, it doesn't impact that section of our business district, because they're already seeing a large impact with the traffic. And if we could find a way to find more parking along that area, if we talk to maybe local clubs that have large parking lots down on West 4th Street, and maybe see if we can start a communication with them. Maybe they can allow business owners or their customers to use their parking lot for a small fee. These business owners would appreciate some communication with the city and maybe this particular owner to this large parking lot on, I believe it's West 4th. So if you could consider this parking ban or start communications with the business owner to the large parking lot. A lot of these business owners would like to see something happen. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question for Mr. Backey. Some of the new lights, the intersection of the lights, where we're instituting these left-hand turns, is the technology there to, sometimes, you know, the lights, maybe it's 20 seconds for a left-hand turn, but then there isn't any traffic coming at you. So I thought these lights today were supposed to kind of allow for that, and then maybe let that left-hand turn signal stay green longer. You know, it happens over here at Dutton Street and on Bridge Street. So some days you'll be sitting there and there's no traffic coming at you, yet you're sitting at a red light when you could be moving, getting the traffic through.
Many of the intersections, in fact, I'd say at this point, most of the intersections in the city are equipped with, in most cases, what are known as loop detectors, which are actually set in the pavement to detect whether there's a vehicle on particular approaches. What we've been doing more recently with modifications at a number of locations, we've been adding camera systems instead, which are a little easier to maintain and don't break down as often. And what the loop detectors do is they determine, again, if there's a vehicle on those particular approaches, and the timing that is set for the traffic signal controller, or in the traffic signal controller, has both a minimum and a maximum time for each approach. So you will get the minimum even if there's nobody there necessarily for one of those left turns, but it will not give, if there is nobody detected, it will quickly move on to the next phase where there may be demand. And that's a way of basically when you have, it doesn't help much at peak hours when you've got a lot of demand in all directions, but what it does help is the off-peak hours when you may have demand in certain locations and nobody coming on one of the other approaches, and so you don't need to give a whole lot of time to those other approaches. But that is dependent on the detection systems functioning properly, and we do have some that are not functioning properly at any given time and need to be repaired, and that's something that both Eric is constantly monitoring, and then our city electricians are constantly trying to repair and maintain these things. The camera system should actually be an improvement in terms of maintainability going forward.
Okay, because I've noticed, like, even Bridge Street on Sunday afternoons, you'll get tied up at 6th Street, and it'll take you 20 minutes to get down to the VFW highway. It's a Sunday afternoon, and there's not too much traffic coming out of the city, but we're still going towards the downtown area. Councilor Laurie?
Thank you. The lights at 133 and Andover Street, leaving downtown Lowell, going up the hill, would it be possible to put a left-hand turn on that set of lights?
Is this you're talking about the intersection of Nesmith and Andover,
Yeah.
or High and Andover?
Nesmith.
Nesmith and Andover. I believe that's a state-controlled intersection, isn't it? So
I thought it was. I had a call recently and a request, and I thought it was a state road, and I meant to put the call in this week, because that ties up really bad at 5. And I said, there's really little we can do about it, but I just wanted to make sure while we were here tonight.
I mean, the request can be made, but it's going to be up to the state whether they feel it's appropriate
Absolutely.
action to take. So it's the left from,
If you were coming from High Street up to Nesmith,
okay, so,
and you would be taking a left,
okay. We can certainly ask them to Eric to take a look at that, and we can ask MassDOT to take a look at it, and we can report back what we learn.
great, thank you.
We'll have a long list for Eric tonight. Moving along to, like, say, parking on the corners. Is there, maybe, I'm wondering if we should start looking at what other communities do. Would it be helpful if we started painting, whatever it is, 10 feet from the curb to the intersection? So it's easier for people to identify that you can't park right up to the intersections. So that would be a suggestion to take a look at too. I know we have signs up, but sometimes they're not enforced. And taking a drive through the neighborhoods lately, we have certain neighborhoods that are really congested, but if you can't see when you're pulling out, it doesn't help anybody. So that would be one suggestion for parking in the neighborhoods also. Maybe we should take a look at that. I don't know if it's feasible. And then, so that would probably go along with proper signage too. Maybe we don't have to put signage up. Maybe we paint the curbs. So one idea there. We had another speaker.
Go.
Okay, thank you.
The no parking here to corner situation, it's a basic state law that you don't park within 20 feet of any intersection. we get requests for the signs all the time, but we try to not put the signs in because they just have sign clutter when you have signs at every intersection like that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and the trouble with paint markings on the curbs is that in the wintertime, they're covered with snow, and they're not seen, they're not legal. Something has to be signed to be enforced. Although this basic law, like parking close to the corner, shouldn't have to be signed to be enforced. It's like parking in front of a fire hydrant or parking in a crosswalk. You don't have to have a sign there to know not to do it.
Right, but we're having trouble enforcing that. I mean, even driving around Fletcher Street, which is on the docket tonight, you come up around Bauer Street and all that, you can't see a thing trying to pull out of some of those side streets.
Yeah, yeah.
And it happens all over the city, so.
Yeah, we've worked with the police, and they've said when there's an issue, if they get called on it, they'll come and enforce it. But, you know, it's a constant problem.
Okay, it's just something we need to work on, so. Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Anne Marie Page. I reside at 26 Fremont Street. I sit on the board of the Centerville Neighborhood Action Group, and I'm the president of the Citywide Neighborhood Council. So we're going to cover all the neighborhoods. As far as you're discussing the VFW and bridge and that little project that they're going to do, hopefully in my lifetime, that library was the second meeting, if not the third. So, I mean, they've got a pretty good idea of what they want to do, what they're supposed to do, and we just want to see it happen in this lifetime. And I don't know I've lived on Christian Hill off Bridge Street for over 40 years, and I don't know what those lights are doing or not doing, but Mother of Heaven, you better not have to get any place in a hurry, because you're not going to get there if you use Bridge Street. I've seen it on a Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock, backed up all the way to Hildreth. And as you said, that left arrow, I see the reason for the arrows, because if I'm coming going left and you're coming going right, there's a better chance we're not going to hit each other with the arrows. But yesterday, I was in the left lane to go left, and 4 cars went through, the 5th one ran the light, and I was the 6th one, so I stopped. I have this thing about red lights and stopping, you know? But I mean, it's like, whatever. I mean, I don't know who's pulling the switches, but if you sit on Bridge Street in Lowell, it's like candid camera. This is not working. And our biggest problem, one of them is, I was very happy to hear Councilor Leahy use the word enforcement, which is the favorite word for all neighborhood leaders, enforcement. And West 6 comes up, 6 comes down. You're right at St. Michael's Rectory and Bridge. That is an everyday event of blocking the intersection. It's a constant blocking the intersection. And if there's anything that needs enforcement, that intersection needs it. I don't care if you get a blow-up doll that looks like a cop and you tape it to a pole. It needs something. And you know how it's funny, because the police lady is there that crosses the children, and she's all in navy blue. She has a little vest and a little symbol on her sleeve. When she's standing there, they're less apt to block the intersection. The minute she's not right there, they block the intersection. So they know they're not supposed to. But that needs serious enforcement, because that blocking, now you've got all of them tied up, and it's an everyday event. As far as your speeding, well, speeding's been going on since I was a kid. So we're hoping you can slow them down. Some people think on Christian Hill the 3rd and 6th are coasting hills and they're on a sled, but they're not. It's not coasting. They're in a car and they've got to slow down. Good news. Yesterday, I saw 3 cruisers on Christian Hill, and they were cruising. That's what they were doing. So I was very, very happy to see that. That was good. The other thing, like I said, the blocking, the lights, somebody's got to revisit the lights. It's just not working. It's gone from bad to worse. We did speak with business people. Heidi Miller and myself walked door to door and spoke to many of them on Bridge Street. And some of them even signed a petition and said they're willing. Very few open their doors before 9 a.m. Maybe 2 barbershops and a beauty parlor. The rest of them don't open their doors before 9. CVS has a giant parking lot, they're fine. Even aluminum siding has parking on the side and on Second. So those other little businesses on Bridge Street, if they can have no parking heading south on Bridge from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., it might help, because what it'll do is the traffic that's going over the bridge or heading for Pawtuckaville can move. The light gives them more time to move, but they get hung up because of the trafficked cars, so now they're hung behind the left lane that's not moving. So I think we'd like to see that revisited. That seems to be it. What's happening is people will do anything to avoid Bridge Street, so they're going up the hill, down the back, coming down first. Coming down first, coming down, and I always forget the name of that other street. And so now you've got a back up coming down first, a back coming down off the back hill, and then they come and they hit the traffic coming in on 110 from Lawrence or Methuen. And that's where the bad school bus accident was the other day. So we realize that we have more cars on the road than we ever did before, but we've got to try to be a little more careful. That pretty much tells you about Bridge Street and the VFW, which is like the nightmare of it all. But since I'm also here for the Citywide Neighborhood Council, we understand that some neighborhood leaders brought to the attention the fact that there's some problems on Shaw Street that needs a stop sign. And the neighbors are quite concerned about it, and they live there 24/7, and they're still quite concerned about it. So I'm sure it's on file in the traffic engineer's office. We'd like to have that revisited, the stop sign that was requested for Shaw Street. Yes, sir?
I just put a motion on that about 3 weeks ago,
Right.
and the results of that,
There's a request to see which intersections would be appropriate for stop signs on Shaw Street. There's just about I think there's a 3 or 4 block section where there aren't any stop signs. Other than that, you have a stop sign every intersection. But because the side streets are the ones that should have the stop signs out there, not Shaw Street itself. That's why I think my response to that was there aren't any intersections where stop signs would be appropriate on Shaw Street itself.
they would be on the side streets.
On the side streets.
Okay.
Yep.
So will we be revisiting it, and could you get a formal final decision over to that neighborhood leader? We'd appreciate that very much, because they're not happy neighbors, and we don't want unhappy neighbors in Lowell, because unhappy neighbors put their houses up for sale and leave town. So I think that's all they gave me for tonight, and we thank you for the neighborhood meeting. We are going to give you a couple of hot items for your next neighborhood subcommittee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Question for traffic engineer. On that intersection of Shaw Street, was that Wilder and Shaw?
It wasn't any particular intersection, it was just the
They
entire
just-
length of Shaw Street to try to reduce speeding on the street.
Okay. So I think we did get a final report, but is there a way we could take a look at it and come up with some sort of a solution to slow it down? I mean, if we can't, we've got to do something. If we can't put stop signs, are you saying we shouldn't put stop signs anywhere on Shaw Street, or?
Yeah, the stop signs, number one, stop signs aren't to be used for slowing traffic down. That's not the purpose of them.
Right.
When people see stop signs where there's no traffic coming the other way, they see, well, there's no point of this stop sign. I'll run this one and I'll run the next one I see because I know they're not needed out here.
Right.
The best way to slow speeds down really is to make the street feel narrow. Having parking on both sides with just a narrow one lane down the middle usually is the best way to do that. And I think they already have that out on Shaw Street, there's parking on both sides. So other than that, there's limited methods you can really do. It's really the physical characteristics of the street that people will drive at what they feel comfortable at. Regardless of what signs are posted, how many signs are posted, they'll drive at the speed that they feel comfortable at.
Is that a street that might are there any other type of ideas? Last week, we talked about Newhall Street, about having these bump outs for trees. If we talk to people in the neighborhood, would that be a solution maybe to narrow the street down? If they're not, I mean, I don't know how many people actually park on that street to slow down traffic, but obviously the speeding is an issue. So if we could come up with any type of creative ideas that we could try, I think that would be the way to go about it.
And bump outs is something we could look at as well at intersections or at particular points. I mean, the trade-off is you do lose parking when you introduce a bump out, unless it's at the
Right.
intersection where you can make it
Yeah,
narrow the street down at the intersection.
okay, all right. Did you have another question? Okay, Council Mercia? Oh,
How you doing? Patrick Farmer. I'm actually the current vice president of CNAG, and I live at 84 Vernon Street. Just had a couple, I know we talked about the timing of the lights, and I know in other larger cities, they do it where the lights are timed so they all change at the same time. So you get kind of more of a flow all going through. I know there's a pedestrian issue, so obviously it can only work for some of the time. And to kind of touch on the pedestrian issue, has the city or DOT looked into any type of pedestrian bridges over some of those larger intersections? I know the Bridge Street one with the kids going to high school, if they had a way they could just avoid it altogether, the lights could just flow whenever we needed left-hand turns. I know obviously that's a money issue, but that would alleviate, that's a huge issue in the morning, is the flow is going, and then the high schoolers start arriving, and the lights, you know, have to go through their cycle, stop, go through the cycle, stop. Sometimes it's one kid, you know, sometimes they've already made it across because they've pressed the button and, you know, snuck on by. The other issue coming from the other side of the bridge that I've noticed are the people getting in the left turn only lane and then cutting over at high speeds in front of people trying to go straight. So they've cheated the whole line. I know I've seen the cruisers, the police bike there from time to time, but I mean, it's daily, every day. So again, back to the enforcement issue. And then with what Anne Marie was saying with the cut-throughs coming up through Centerville, I mean, they fly down the tiniest little side streets. Everything they do, they think they're saving time. They'll come up my street, gun it up Bennett Street, go down Reservoir Street. I mean, it's just to get down to that first street and then reverse in the afternoon, you know, doing the same pattern, but in reverse. I don't know if we used to have a children sign that was taken down a few years ago. It hasn't really been put back up. I don't know if stop signs, more of them could kind of address that. I mean, I don't mind having a couple extra seconds to stop so my kids can ride their bike without, you know, fear of being run down. I mean, to me, I guess the big thing would be any type of pedestrian bridge would, I mean, save all kinds of time. Thank you.
thank you. To Adam, any
Sure. Good.
chance that we might take a look at that?
Well, a couple reactions. We have looked at that a number of times in the past and discussed it. While pedestrian bridges may seem like an appealing solution to situations like that, there are actually two issues that, in addition to the question of cost, there are two other very significant issues with pedestrian bridges. One of them is that, frankly, they rarely get used unless you make it absolutely impossible for a pedestrian to cross at grade at the same time. But the more significant issue that really basically makes it infeasible to even consider a pedestrian bridge at that intersection is that if you are going to construct a pedestrian bridge, it must be compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board requirements. And you need about 15 feet minimum clear underneath the bridge, plus the thickness of the structure of the bridge in order to get to the deck. And then in order to be ADA compliant, you have to have a ramp that rises no more than 1 inch for every foot of length. So you have to rise it up about 16 feet at a 1 inch to a foot pitch, and you have to have a landing every 30 feet, a flat landing of 5 feet. So you would end up with a ramp that is somewhere in the order of several hundred feet long at each end of the bridge. And there is no real estate there where one could construct a several hundred foot long handicap ramp at each end of the bridge. And one of the unfortunate things that happens when you do that is you make it all the less inviting for anyone to actually use the pedestrian bridge, because they have to walk the additional couple hundred feet up and down the ramps. And so as a result, that is even more encouragement for pedestrians to just try to scamper across at grade even after you've built the bridge. Now, that said, there is a fairly significant thing that is basically has no cost whatsoever attached to it that can be done to significantly lessen the delays associated with pedestrian behaviors at intersections, the delays for vehicles, as well as being more consistent with the way pedestrians actually behave and therefore safer for the pedestrians themselves. And that is this issue that we keep coming back to in discussing this intersection, but also others, the idea of having the pedestrian phase be concurrent rather than push-button activated and exclusive. And that's something that, Eric and we, whenever we're working on an intersection where we have the opportunity to upgrade it, if it's one that's entirely in the city's control, we are always advocating for the concurrent pedestrian phasing, so there is no added delay attached to the pedestrian. And again, it's more safer for the pedestrians as well. And I think, fortunately, it appears that for the permanent improvement project at this location, MassDOT seems to have softened their opposition to that and seems to be at least showing on their current design plans that they're willing to do that with this intersection when they do the complete project. And I think that will help, again, one of the things that will help as a result of that project.
Thank you. One more speaker.
Hi, my name is Amy Saba Farmer. I'm at 84 Vernon Street, and I'm currently a board member on the Centerville Neighborhood Action Group. And I just wanted to touch upon a few things that my fellow group members had mentioned about the severe traffic issue, maybe creating a 6 to 9 a.m. Ban on that side of Bridge Street, going toward VFW from 6th to 1st. As Anne Marie said, the traffic there is unbelievable. We already stepped forward and, got them to not include a drive-through in the new Dunkin' Donuts, although there's a Dunkin' Donuts 1,000 feet down the road. And so, thankfully that didn't happen. But with the traffic being backed up, as Patrick had said, they are cutting through a lot more of the neighborhoods. We have a lot of four-way stop signs up the taller part of Centerville, and nobody seems to adhere to them. Maybe some more enforcement to watch those four-way stops. I know at the end of, it goes from our street, Vernon Street, between 6th and 3rd, and it's like a speedway. And thank the city for filling the big hole that was in the street. However, the people who were slowing down to not bottom out their car are now just kind of racing through, so it had kind of a reverse impact on our street. And because we have children who enjoy activities, it makes it very difficult for them to kind of enjoy themselves and have fun. And again, any ideas with, creating the lights, changing it once, or any engineering ideas to improve that situation are greatly appreciated. I think this afternoon when we were coming here was probably one of the first times in a very long time that we even used Bridge Street, and we were surprised that we were able to get right through, because we normally just avoid it at any cost, because it's been a huge hassle. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Mercia?
I think the prevailing concern here that I could gather from everybody speaking is the no parking from 6 to 9 a.m. from 6th Street to 1st Street heading to the VFW. Am I right there? Are we talking about on both sides of the street? Heading south to the VFW, okay. So that's your number one concern. So, Eric, you did get that, right? Okay, so could you give us a report as to what your ideas are? Because this is of concern to them. This is the number one thing. And having said that, I just have a philosophy about this in general, that the city council and the transportation department, we can put up all the signage that's necessary, and people say there's no go slow children signs anymore. There is no such thing anymore as a go slow, because I tried to get some and you can't get them. They won't put them up anymore. We can put all the signage, but I don't know how to instill common sense and courtesy in drivers. I still don't know how we could do that. That's the number one problem, because they're not reading the signs, they're not paying attention. I think the only way you can do that is through the pocketbook, and enforcement is number one. That's the only way I know how to instill common sense and courtesy into the drivers. Other than that, the council's hands are tied, but if you could, Eric, look at that, because that is the number one concern with everybody here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll adjourn for tonight. We have some issues that traffic engineer can take a look at and report back to us. And we'll just keep this conversation going on. We'll keep an eye on the neighborhoods. Any concerns that come up, we'll meet again and try to address them. But for now, we'll try to take care of Bridge Street and take a look at the enforcement of the parking on the corners. Okay, thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you.